Welcome to this evening's AASPT Female Athlete SIG podcast. My name is Chrissy Mansfield, and I am the chair of the Female Athlete SIG of AASPT. We're thrilled to have Ciara Burgi joining us this evening. Ciara is the Director of Health and Performance for the Las Vegas Aces, where she's been leading the charge since 2024. Her journey through elite sports is nothing short of inspiring. Before her current role, she spent over 3 years with the Houston Texans, including 2 years as the return to performance lead. Ciara's expertise spans physical therapy, sports science, and strength and conditioning. Developed during her time at Duke University Athletics, where she completed a Division I athletics fellowship in 2018 and stayed on until 2020. Fun fact, Ciara and I were actually classmates at Duke, which makes this conversation extra special this evening. Her credentials speak volumes: a doctorate in physical therapy from Duke, a manual therapy fellowship with the Institute for Athlete Regeneration, and a sports residency at Houston Methodist Sugar Land. She's also a certified strength and conditioning coach and a published author in leading journals, including the British Journal of Sports Medicine and the Journal of Athletic Training. Today, we'll dive into her unique perspective on athlete health, performance optimization, and what it takes to succeed at the highest level of professional sports. So let's get started. Ciara, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Impressive resume and career path over the past 10 years. Can you share a little bit about how your career path brought you to your current role with the Las Vegas Aces?
Yeah, I honestly think even going back into PT school, I just have come into everything with an open mind and just kind of tried to see what I was drawn to and where life was going to take me, and really been open to whatever lies in front. So I haven't really been a solid 2-year plan, 5-year plan type of girl. It's just kind of whatever pops up and I feel drawn to is what I sort of taken advantage of. And so, yeah, it was never my dream or goal to work in professional sports or even college sports. It just kind of happened just through a series of opportunities and connections. And so, yeah, I think that, you kind of read my resume, so there's no need for me to re-talk through all of that. But I think, yeah, if you look at my resume or even all the certifications, it looks like I'm a huge box checker. And I was like, oh, I'm going to graduate, and then I'm going to do a residency, and then I'm going to do a fellowship, and then I'm going to do another fellowship, and then I'm going to work in college. It's not the true story of how it's happened. It's just I've been drawn to people and drawn to experiences, and have just kind of, that's led me to where I am now. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I got here.
Well, that's awesome. I know a lot of younger clinicians, and thinking back to being in PT school, and when you're looking at what you want to do, would be super inspired by you working with the Aces. And I feel like women's basketball has gotten a lot more popular over the past several years, which is really cool that you have the opportunity to work with the Aces. Can you tell us a little bit about what a typical day looks like for you in season? Because I don't know if a lot of people know what Director of Health and Performance means. And so tell us a little bit about what your days look like.
Yeah, for sure. So, the structure of every WNBA team is a little bit different. We have the Director of Health and Performance model, and my team is, there's 4 of us in total, and I still have a clinical role in addition to an admin role. So there's only 4 of us, from strength and conditioning to physical therapy and athletic training. And so everybody's kind of all hands on deck. So a typical day in season, man, it depends on so many things. It depends on if we're practicing or if we're home or if we're away. But in the morning, we probably get there around 7:30 and prep for the day, make sure we're all ready for the women to come in the building. And then we practice from 11 to 1 when we practice. So between 8 and 11, the women are kind of rotating through different places where they're either doing a shooting time on court with coaches, they're in the weight room, or they're doing treatment or prep for the day. They practice from 11 to 1. And then after that, again, there's treatment, recovery, maybe a lift, depending on if they lifted before or after practice. And then they're out of the building by 3 o'clock, I would say. And then we just kind of download the day and get prepped for the next one. To be honest, we don't practice a lot in season. We do some, but our schedule is so dense and intense that we can be playing, 8 games in 16 days in 5 different cities. And so sometimes you're just traveling or getting ready for a game. game is pretty common in basketball, or if you have a night game, you have a shoot around in the morning, go home and everybody naps, myself included, and then go for the game in the evening. And so, yeah, it really depends on if it's like a practice day, a travel day, if you're home, if you're away. But yeah, there's a team of 4 of us. And in my role, like I still have a largely clinical role, especially in season. And then, the fun admin work on top of that as well.
And so what does admin work look like in the WNBA setting? I think of admin work in a clinic, like a PT clinic or a hospital-based clinic. But what does that look like for you?
Yeah, for me, again, it depends on when in season. Obviously, preseason is physicals and getting all that stuff up set. But then in season, it's really like serving and figuring out whatever our girls need. If they need a massage, if they need to go see a dermatologist, if they need a dentist appointment, if they need to follow up with a doctor. And so it's really like creating and maintaining relationships with all of our contracted providers. If they need to see our psychologist, talk to our dietitian. So like kind of based on what's going on and what their needs are, it's really just making sure that they have the right connections with the people that they need as fast as possible to kind of keep things going. And then there's always planning and packing and getting ready for travel and a lot of the budgeting and all that stuff, like that admin work is right now and in the off season and prepping for the next but in season it's really just like all about serving the girls and anticipating what we'll need for our upcoming road trips based on where we're going to be. And so it's really like being in the moment with serving their needs and then thinking 3 steps ahead of what's to come in the coming weeks and really being prepared so nothing falls through the cracks.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So a lot of it sounds like is orchestrating their care outside of like rehab and like strength and conditioning in addition to like the traveling schedule.
For sure. Yep, exactly.
Interesting. Yeah. So it sounds like you're working with a lot of different professionals. You said there's 4 on the team you directly work with. So how do you foster collaboration between the medical staff, the team of 4 you work with, the coaching staff, and the performance teams who all have, the same goal, helping these athletes, but, also have different individual goals of what they're trying to achieve with these girls?
Yeah, I think the model that we're trending towards working with this more so is like more of a transdisciplinary approach. So very often things can be super siloed where it's like medical and then strength and conditioning and then nutrition, right? And then coaching. And that's a super common model and one that I've worked in a lot. But then there's always that like transition point that's tricky of who's in charge when it's in a certain room or a certain space or a certain domain. And so I will be honest, like this hasn't translated to coaching staff yet, but we started with our own group with our health and performance team. And it's so maybe more so going based on topics. So if our big topics are readiness, recovery, education, and impact, like giving our athletes a good education to make the best decision possible. And then rehab, those are kind of our 4 pillars. So readiness, rehab, education, and what did I say?
Readiness.
I should know this. Recovery. Anyway, so
recovery.
It's like taking all of our domains and making sure like how does each area of expertise filter into that? So like if we're talking about the topic of readiness, what does a dietitian think optimal readiness is from their lens? What does a psychologist think optimal readiness is from their professional lens? Our physical therapist, our strength and conditioning coach. So we're talking more topically as opposed to domain, right? And so kind of going trans and going across discipline and talking about how we want to solve this singular complex problem of readiness, of recovery, of rehabilitation, right? And so really just having systems in place in each of our main pillars as opposed to working in professional domains, because then it makes things just a little bit more, have like better continuity when we take more of like a transdisciplinary approach. And so, yeah, I think that model is what maybe more sporting organizations are doing overseas, and it's a little bit more of a modern adaptation. But again, the WNBA doesn't have a lot of structure and a lot of history. And so like we have the freedom to create whatever kind of structure we want within our department. And so I think that it's worked really, really well. And I think we're excited to like expand that more to the coaching staff and get their thoughts. But we've only been here a couple of years, so you got to grow smart and grow slow and keep the main thing, which is really great relationships with our girls and good buy-in. But Yeah, as far as that, it's just like problem solving together. So talking about what the problem is as opposed to having people work isolated in their professional domain.
I think that's really neat that you have like the goals as a whole in mind versus like the individual domains. And I'd be curious to know, how was that model developed? Is that something that has been used in other like teams, health teams within professional sports that you've seen? Is that something that was already in place? How did that get developed?
Yeah, when I first got this job, I spent a lot of time talking to Tina Murray, she was a strength coach at University of Louisville, director of high performance there, worked with the Sacramento Kings. She's worked all over professional sport. And I didn't know how the heck to be a leader because I was not in a leadership position before. So I talked to her a lot about structure and how great departments are structured. And that's literally what she is studying in her education and as she goes on in her career. And so we talked a lot about structure, and she's the one that like brought that up to me and that more of that sort of approach. And so that's where that comes from. And I think like one of the coolest things is like, as we were heading into finals, the WNBA finals this past year, like I sent out an entire packet of information about those different areas. So that way the girls had all of their resources to make the best decision possible, all the way down to like food timing, energy timing for the days of the game, the days of on recovery. And so like, yeah, ultimately like it created like a deliverable that we used in finals, just surrounding each of those kind of areas. And so, yeah, it's cool. I mean, we have so much work to do and need to keep building on it, but that's the general structure to kind of eliminate those siloed barriers. We're just talking more about topics, which helps.
Yeah. And I love the thought of communicating that with the team too, like so that they have their expectation of how can I help myself and get the help I need for individual needs. So
and people won't always make the quote unquote best decision, but it's our job as health professionals to give people the information to make the best decision. And as a whole, like our athlete population is super curious and super well educated and wants to learn those things. And so, yeah, maybe 12 out of 12 of the athletes on the roster aren't going to take the recommendations, but if 7 out of 12 do, like, you know, that's great. And ultimately our job is to like leave them better consumers of their body than we found them. And so that's another thing too, just that I think our staff really values, is trying to just make them better consumers of their body and have them understand that better. So it's been helpful. Yeah.
Awesome. So similarly, going off that, and this may be how you've done it, how do you build trust with the athletes so they feel comfortable sharing those concerns about their health or workload with you? I think you shared like giving that information of the ways you can help them and those different pillars, but are there other ways that you've built trust with the team to get buy-in?
Yeah, I think that completely aside, like it took us 2 years almost to earn the right to be able to deliver that information to them. Like our setting is big on athlete trust and athlete relationship. And so really our first 2 years, our goal was player experience. We wanted the athletes to want to be in the building. We wanted them to want to come see us. We wanted to build good buy-in with the locker room. And so honestly, on our part, that took a lot of listening, a lot of doing what the athletes perceived that they wanted and perceived was best for them. And then as we built buy-in, we could slowly integrate what some of our ideas too. And I think a perfect example is like the lead rehab specialist on my team is Jerica Thomas, and she worked at USA Track and Field before she came to the Aces and literally fine-tuned the finest Ferraris of USA Track and Field. Like she is very, very, very talented. And she has so many tools in her toolbox. And what did she do most of her first year here with the Aces? Like a lot of soft tissue, because that's what the girls wanted. That's what the girls valued. And that's how we built buy-in with the locker room. And so like, there's a lot of, I don't want to say sacrifice, but like sort of you have to like sacrifice what you perceive is best and really, really listen to what they want, what they need, and what they perceive as best. And then as you build up that trust, then you can slowly start to sprinkle in more things that you know you think can benefit them. But it's really like a slow roll in building trust with the locker room. And a lot of it comes down to listening, to meeting them in the middle, to putting your own biases and your own desires and your own goals aside and really understanding what they want, because they want to be heard, they want to be listened to. They want to be met in the middle or closer to their side. And that's how you build buy-in and good relationships with them ultimately. And so that's been a lot of what our first couple of years were about. And you can't do anything if you don't have buy-in with the locker room. And so that's what we prioritized. And like, I'm really proud of the crew for doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it feels like similar to any setting and in therapy, and it's
For
building
sure.
trust, it sounds like, but it's just, different needs, of an athlete compared to a teenager compared to an elderly person. So just interesting how that communication plays a role no matter what setting you're working in.
Yeah, but it's all the same, right? You have to feel like we have 12 different personalities in our locker room. And so you have to figure out how to connect and reach each of them and then reach them as a collective. And so it's like no different than outpatient. All types of people exist everywhere. So there's all personalities everywhere. And I think that that's important to remember. So just like approach each person with a fresh start and with curiosity and really get to know who they are, and don't have assumptions about who you think they are or who you think professional athletes are. Cause like there's every type of personality everywhere I've ever been. And so that holds true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of going off that, because it sounds like now that you've built that trust, you can delve a little bit more into some of the areas you're passionate about and some of the skills you've built over your career. How do you manage the competing demands of athlete recovery with load management and then player availability while avoiding burnout as well? Because there's a lot of things going on. You mentioned 8 games and 16 days. So a lot going on there. So how do you manage all that or help support the athletes through that?
Yeah, I think thankfully we have a small roster. So like coming from the NFL where you have, 53 men on the roster, but then 16 practice squad guys and IR, like it's a huge roster and you can't necessarily be super individualized, where we carried 11 women on our roster last year, and like it should be individualized. So the expectation is that it's very individualized. And so, again, you look at our schedule, you look at the schedule kind of in like 2-week chunks and figure out, all right, what do we have ahead of ourselves? How do we need to prescribe certain recovery modes? What do we need to be aware of? What do we need to take with us on the road? What do we know we have access to at hotels? And really like thinking ahead on those things. And then really taking an individualized approach, because sure, I can tell you there's 5 athletes on our team that are probably going to play over 30 minutes. But aside from that, it kind of depends on the flow of the game. So low minute players, medium minute players, high minute players, and figuring out, where each of them are in the stress recovery cycle, right? Our high minute players are going to be more on the recovery end of things and prescribing that. And our low minute players are going to be more on the stress side of things. And so we have to figure out how to prescribe stress. And so, I mean, thankfully there's 4 staff members and 11 women. And so we just kind of figure out how to take a systematic but an individualized approach at the same time based on athlete needs. And you think about age too. Last year we had a 37-year-old on our team all the way down to a 22-year-old, right? And so like those people, regardless of how many minutes they play, are going to have different needs. And so luckily we can take a very individualized approach, just because that's the expectation at this setting, and it should be. With a larger roster, it's impossible to do that. But for us, that's what we can do, which is nice.
Yeah, that's super interesting, thinking about like, the Texans, which is a large roster compared to this. And I guess I never really thought of it that way, about like you can give more of an individualized approach with that
for sure
roster.
And that's what they expect too, honestly. Like even if they would benefit from the same strength and conditioning workout as the person next to them, like they want it to be their own. They want it to be individualized. So it's part of meeting the expectation of the setting too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, how do you strike that balance of individual athlete autonomy with the team-wide performance goals or protocols, things they're doing as a whole? Is there ways you approach that differently? I know like you talked about the individual like rehab recovery plans, but what about, thinking about that team approach for goals for all the girls?
Yeah, I think again, like we'll continue to do a better job of that as the years go on. But like the first couple of years, we really prioritized athlete relationship and making everything individualized and going more on the athlete autonomy side of things. And now that we have a little bit more buy-in and clout built up with the roster, I think we can start to kind of shift them towards more prescriptive things and then start to establish some more KPIs that are like, yes, standard, but also individualized at the same time, right? Like standardized strength norms, standardized power norms, like standardized conditioning norms. Like we can start to develop those things and hold most of our roster to it. And there's going to be certain people that are going to opt out, and like that's okay too. And you just have to accept that and not dig your heels in too hard. And usually, this happens with anything, but if like 6 or 7 people opt into something, then those other ones are going to maybe get curious about what's going on. And so they'll start to, filter over in that way. So you just have to get buy-in and be patient, and then also respect if people opt out. That is their professional athletes, and that's also their prerogative. And they go more on the autonomy end of things. So yeah, it's like balancing structure with balancing autonomy, and it's a little bit different for every person. But again, you want to capture a majority of the roster, and there's a few that you won't, and you have to like accept that as well.
Yeah. Thinking of the differences, since you've worked in several settings now, and I'm sure at Duke you worked with different, like both male and female sports, worked with the Texans, which was male dominant. What challenges or insights do you feel like you've encountered designing individualized return to play programs for these elite female athletes compared to male athletes? Are there things that you've changed, taken into account? Do you feel like things you've learned over the past few years working in this setting compared to with the Texans?
I don't know how much, and maybe people won't like this answer, but I don't know how much it like differs by gender as much as like it just differs by individual. So it's really like being super curious about each person, what their wants and desires and needs are, what their goals are, what they need to get back to, and really understanding like what are your biases from the past or from your own experiences going into this encounter with this individual, and really treating each case as like a fresh start, a new opportunity to get to know someone and take what you know and take the principles that you know and believe in and figure out how to adapt them to fit this individual. So I don't know that it's like gender specific as much as it is like every individual is another case study to like refine your craft for that particular person. So again, maybe people won't love that answer so much, but I think it's like be aware of your biases, be aware of those things as much as you can, and then like treat each athlete as another case study to like, refine your craft, like I said.
And I think too, the importance of like, no matter what the person's background, like making it individualized is probably the most important thing, because they might have like, psychosocial things going on, dietary, like all the different needs, which
and that's
plays
like
all into
not
that
gender specific.
Absolutely.
And I think too, like you have to be aware of the culture around you, where like football is a very militant, structured culture. Like, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, do whatever you say. We all do a workout together. We're never late for meetings because we get fined. Like, it's a very militant, structured culture. And like our culture is serious, but also loose at the same time. And our athlete population is super curious, super well educated. I'm not saying that the Texans players were not well educated. I'm just saying like the way that they were raised up into sport, our women probably had to have a lot more input and decision making as they were raised up, as opposed to kind of like being given structure the whole time. And so you just have to like know the culture of the athlete population as well. And so our women are going to have different needs just because they're a very curious. They're going to give you pushback. They're going to ask why, and not from like a challenge you perspective, but like they genuinely want to know why they're doing anything. And some of the football players, like if you think about if a wide receiver is learning a route tree, he's not going to ask why. He's just going to go run the route because that's not part of their culture. It's like, yep, I will run this play and follow those directions. And so like culturally, football is just going to follow directions and not buck the system as much. And our women will question things more, which is, it's a great opportunity to collaborate and educate and develop a relationship. So it's like knowing your sport culture too, I think is really important.
No, that's super interesting. And I think I'm sure over your career, just with like the Duke Athletics opportunity to working with different athletes, you saw cultural differences between
For sure.
different sports and, male versus female sports.
Yeah, like
things
a
like
Duke
that.
student's gonna tell you their pain's like a 7.2, and I'm like, okay, like we don't
Yeah.
need decimals, like, but that's a Duke student thing where like I haven't heard that since, you know what I mean?
That's awesome.
It's true. It's so true.
Shifting gears a little bit, technology has definitely become a lot bigger in the rehab realm, especially with like strength training. What are your thoughts on all this tech, and do you find any at all to be helpful in rehab? Thinking things like the Whoop, Oura-Ring, Catapult, GPS tracking, anything like that. Do you use some of those tools? Is that something you haven't really delved into? Do athletes ask a lot about that?
Yeah, I think it's super important. And I also think, like with anything, we can overdo something, and the pendulum always swings to extremes, right? And so I think that there is a lot of tech out there. And I think that some of it is great. And I think also, like, don't forget that the relationship piece of things, like, is paramount, right? For getting people to do what you want them to do. And, you can do all the numbers and everything, but like, if you don't have a good relationship, I think some of that stuff is not meaningless, but less meaningful. And so I love data, and I think that it helps you be objective. It helps you make better decisions. It helps hold you accountable. It helps hold the athlete accountable. So I think that those like accountability checks and balances are great. And I think, as with anything, like, you can't put all your eggs in one basket, right? Like, if the only thing you ever do is dry needle all your patients, like, okay, it's a great tool, but it shouldn't be the only thing you do, right? So it's like, it's a part of the picture. It's a tool in the toolbox, and I think it's really, really important from an accountability standpoint. Like, what I am doing, making the improvements that I think it should, and I think it's good for athletes for feedback. So, we like dynamometers, we like force plates. I think, especially in field sports where people run fast, I think that GPS tracking is really, really, really important. I think it's tough for people like O-line, D-line. I don't know that we've figured out how to quantify that work very well yet, right? There's some data out there that exists, but I don't know that we've figured out how to quantify that. But anything with sprinting or high speed distance or a volume or intensity, like, I think that those are really important things to know as you're returning someone, right? Like, how much volume will they have to undergo? What is the amount of intensity they will have to undergo, and trying to plan that. So that stuff is super, super, super valuable. And it's like not the end all be all, but I find it, yes, extremely valuable.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, you don't want to just be a wrench. You want to be all the tools in the toolbox. And if you focus too much on some of those tools, you're not using that diversity of skill that you've developed over the years. So
and I'm not a slow adapter, but like I want to be like a thoughtful adapter of technology too, where it's like, are we testing something just to test something, or are we testing something to make a decision? Like, are we actually acting on the data, or are we just collecting numbers because it's fancy? And so like, if we're going to have an action step, then great, let's collect all the data we want. But if we're just like jumping on force plates every week and we're not doing anything with it, like, our athletes aren't going to buy in if you're not changing things based on that. And so like, you have to, for me, it's like, are you doing the basics really well? And then if you're collecting data, what is your action plan from there? So I think that's really important too.
Yeah. Super interesting though, how it's grown and exploded over the
boy, has it ever. I know. When I was in fellowship, which was 2017, no, like maybe 2018 was the first time I like got exposed to Catapult. And I was like, think about where we are now. And that wasn't like that many years ago. So it's like,
right.
Oh,
yeah.
Things have exploded.
So as both a DPT and CSCS, and you working with that like team aspect, do you feel like there's philosophical differences between physical therapists who prioritize more like the tissue healing versus strength coaches who are really emphasizing progressive overload? And then, you have the condensed WNBA season. How do you navigate all that? And do you feel like some of those differences in thought process are ever a challenge to navigate? Or do you feel like because you have those pillars you talked about, you can kind of like work within that? I don't know. Just would be interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think like in some ways that question is like asking a little bit of like, what's the difference between orthopedics and sports medicine? Like orthopedics is sports medicine, right? But then with sports medicine, sometimes you're like pushing boundaries a little bit, or you're like, ooh, okay, I have to weigh risk reward, right? Like we had a woman who gave birth July 1st this year, and she played in a game, I want to say September 9th. And it's like, is it best practice to return someone from having a baby to professional sport in 72 days or whatever? Like, no. Like you couldn't talk to a single OBGYN that would say, yeah, that's best practice for sure, right? It's not. But like, do you have objective checkpoints along the way to make sure, hey, are you safe? Are you not doing long-term damage to your body? And like, the tough part about tissue healing is, we know this, it's like a moving target. As you stress something, it becomes stronger. As you stress it again, it becomes stronger. And so like in sports medicine, you kind of want to like live on the edge and be close to where that boundary is, where in orthopedics, you can make more conservative decisions because it doesn't matter as much, right? And so it's like sports medicine is considering all those factors. Are we in finals or are we in preseason? And even in the NFL, like if you're in preseason, but you're working with a guy who, if he doesn't participate in preseason, has no chance of making the roster, you're going to push things because that's his dreams and livelihood and career and hopes on the line. Versus if it's your starting quarterback in preseason, you're going to sit them down. So it's like sports medicine to me, and that's like sports performance in general, is like, that's why I'm in it, because it's like you kind of, it's a little stressful, right? And so I like to be a little bit stressed, I think. And so you're always like weighing risk reward, but still trying to make the best long-term decision for that athlete and their body and not put them at harm, but like risk it a little bit. And that's why I'm like so grateful for my team and all of my coworkers of the past, because the weight of that decision is never on your shoulders. Like you chat about it with other people, you look each other in the eye, you look the athlete in the eye, weigh all the options. They're like, all right, are we going to do this thing? Like, all right, let's do it. Right. And so it's like a little bit more of like a team risk. So I like that aspect of things. I think like put it all out on the table, collaborate with other people, get their best thoughts, and then make a collective decision. And that to me is like, that's the difference between sports medicine and orthopedics. And like Sue Falsoni, who I worked with at the Texans, would say that all the time. Like, we're working in sports medicine, not orthopedics. That's where we take really calculated risks. And I think that like I carry that with me all the time and think about that a lot.
Yeah, I think that's, being comfortable living in the gray as opposed to like the black and white. And I feel like, there's that range of like you said, the safety versus like the time in season and what's on the line. So I do think that's a big difference between orthopedics and sports. And I think there's, I'm sure, a skill that you have to develop of like getting comfortable of how far you're going to take it versus like how conservative you're going to be depending on the situation.
Make some mistakes and go over the edge sometimes, and that's okay too. But
and I'm sure compared to your first patient you treated in your career to now, it's like your philosophy is probably very different compared to that new grad mentality. So
for sure,
the beauty of experience.
God bless all those total knees I messed up on my first 3 years of practice and all the Gen Pop. I am grateful for you for allowing me to make a lot of mistakes so I could hopefully make less mistakes as I get into this world. But man,
reassuring for
man.
Those get there. Reassuring for those new grads or students listening that you'll get there and build that expertise. So we're all still learning. But we're kind of switching gears to some leadership stuff, because I would say I consider you a leader in our field and a leader in, not just athletics, but sports medicine, and as a leader for like female physical therapists wanting to further their career. So what have you learned about leadership through your career, in both in advocating for athletes and then also like mentoring female athletes wanting to enter either into female or male dominated sports?
Yeah, man, I feel like I'm learning so much about leadership now that I'm in my first like formal leadership role. And yeah, it's been a tough transition because it's not necessarily something we're trained in. And I think, like, for me at least, as a clinician, you kind of have a good idea of how what success looks like, because if someone's getting better, you're probably doing a good job, and if someone's not getting better, like, you should self-reflect and maybe do a better job, right? And so, like, as a leader, I think I'm still trying to figure out what, like, my metric for success is and how I know I'm doing a good job. So I think that that's been like one of the biggest struggles in transitioning to this type of role for me. And I think too, like, I've taken a lot of leadership lessons, good and bad, from all the leaders that I've had in the past, and I'm super grateful for that. I think it's just like, it's really useful to know what we don't want to do in life by having jobs we hate or careers we hate or settings we hate. Like, I think I'm grateful for leaders that I've had too that have led in a way that I don't want to lead. So that way I know how to, like, form my leadership. And so, yeah, I think it's just like, I mean, as with anything, I think I'm a product of a bunch of different people that have, like, loved me into being and into this space. And so, yeah, I'm really just, like, grateful for all the people that have, spent time with me along this journey. And so, yeah, I think that's what I tell, like, younger people too, is just, like, dive in super deep wherever you're at, develop great relationships wherever you're at. You can learn anything from any setting, even if it's a bad job or a bad setting or a bad clinical rotation. Like, that's so valuable because you know what you don't like. And we always are just searching for, like, the euphoric what we do like, but I think it's really valuable to know, like, what doesn't fit. And so even diving deep into those experiences, I think, is really, really important. And then, like, if you dive in deep, you develop great relationships, and those people are the phone calls when you're lost or don't know what you're doing or have questions. And so, like, more than anything, it's like the relationships I've developed along the way are the phone calls that I make when I'm panicking or don't know what's going on, which happens occasionally. So yeah.
I think cool building that, like, network of people who have built you up along the way and influence your leadership style, but also your treatment style and you as a person. And I think that's important for younger clinicians to know, is, like, every stage, whether it's, like, your first clinical to, like, your first job to your dream job, is important.
For sure. And, like, there's even classmates, like, I had a question about a concussion last year and I called Bobby, right? Like, there's even classmates that you have that you, like, I'll tell you, there's a lot of problems I can't solve, but I can at least identify them. And there isn't anybody in my network that I don't think can't help me solve a problem, but I sure don't have all the answers. But, like, I got a lot of people I can call, which, like, I'm grateful for. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really cool perspective. You can't be an expert in every single thing, but you can know
Sure,
who
I'm not.
to reach out to help you.
I know who to call. Maybe that's
it. For young professionals,
yes, let's go.
I have a little friend joining me. Hi, buddy. For young professionals aspiring to work into elite sports. Hold on 1 second. Can you go, Daddy? Come here.
Uh-oh. A fun little visitor.
All good, all good.
That's
Surprise
hilarious.
Visitors. For young professionals aspiring to work in elite sports, what do you think is the most critical skills that you've gained over your career, or advice you would give for people looking to transition into that elite environment?
I think we already talked about it a little bit, and maybe I'm just biased because that was my journey, but, like, don't be in a rush to get anywhere. I think I am so grateful for the 3.5 years that I spent working in outpatient, because I just got a lot of reps. Like, in pro sports, you don't get that many reps. So seeing 20, 25, 30 patients a day, like, I got a lot of reps throughout those 3 years, where here, like, we have a roster of the same 11 women, and no, knock on wood, not that much happens over the course of the year. And like, that's not that much. I would see more people in a single day than I see in a single year here. You know what I mean? So you get to like, you don't get that much diversity. Your evaluation skills can get worse, right? If you just go straight to pro sport. And so I think like, don't be in a rush to get anywhere, and like really value getting a lot of reps, because everybody's bad at their job when they graduate, even though we think we're good. Like, we're not. You and I both know that, right? And so like, just reps makes you better. And then having like surrounding yourself with people that you can go to ask questions as you're getting those reps. I think that that's how you like get good and hone your craft. And I think the challenge of working in higher level sport is not your craft, it's dealing with all of the other entities surrounding it. So you better be pretty comfortable with your craft once you kind of work in that level, because there's a lot of other things that are going to stress you out. And so hopefully, you know, those basics of your craft don't stress you out. And it's not a great place to make big mistakes, I would say, on that sort of stage. And so that's left off for, again, shout out to all my total knee replacements. That's that's left for those people. So I think that that's the biggest thing. And then I think like, I don't know, again, probably coming from my own bias, but don't have too narrow of a focus. Like, if you are so bent on working in professional sport, I would ask you why. Like, have you really dug into the why? Like, what are your assumptions about professional sport? What makes you want to work in that level so badly that you need to get there? And like, understanding what your assumptions are. If it's like, because it's flashy and hype, and like, you think that everybody's going to be motivated in professional sport, you don't want to work with unmotivated people in the clinic. Like, guess what? There's unmotivated professional athletes also, right? Like, again, we already said this, but all types of people exist everywhere. So like, if you really want to be somewhere and need to be somewhere, like, ask yourself why. Because if it is just the optics and the free food and the free clothes, like, that's going to wear out real quickly on those hard days when you get home from the airplane at 3 a.m. and got to be back at 7 a.m. Right. And so there has to be a little bit more depth in why you want to work in that area. And then like, don't be in a rush, like, hone your craft, get really good at your craft, and life will move you when you're meant to move in that direction.
Yeah. Kind of that patience of like, you know, the steps it takes to get there. And
for sure.
Yeah. I think I had a mentor once that said, instead of a career ladder, it should be a rock wall. Like, every experience is like something that helps you grow to get to the next level and build you as a professional, as a clinician. So great to hear that advice, because I do think sometimes it's a very like appealing career path, but maybe people aren't aware of like what goes into that. So
don't have rose-colored glasses about it too. And I think if you have too narrow of a focus, like, you might miss a lot of things in your periphery that are meant for you, right? Like, maybe something over here is meant for you and it's not actually that. But if you stay too narrow of a focus, again, you might miss out on other things that really are meant for you. And so that's really what I think too.
So just to finish off here, because this has been a great conversation, I feel like really helpful for people wanting to learn about your career path and professional sports. Is there one actionable thing that you think clinicians can do to better serve female athletes? And maybe it's just that individualized approach that you talked about and approaching with curiosity, but anything that you would add as like a takeaway working with elite female athletes?
Yeah, I think curiosity is huge. And then like, being aware of your own biases, which I know is tough sometimes because it's usually a blind spot for a reason. But like, if you think that females are just small males, or that they're all weak and have knee valgus, like, that's what you're going to look for when they're in front of you, right? And so like, try to approach each encounter, whether that's male or female, with like just a fresh perspective, open eyes. And I think that that's really the best thing. So it's not I think like, be aware of your biases and approach each encounter with curiosity, and use your experiences to guide that curiosity. But at the same time, like, I think that that's the biggest thing, is like, always be curious about your thoughts, be curious about your decisions, be curious about the athlete in front of you, and their environment and their constraints. And I think that that's probably what I would say.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being willing to join us tonight for our SIG podcast. I think a lot of people would see you as a leader in this field, and I know I see you as a leader and somebody that I'm excited to learn more from throughout your career. So thanks for joining.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, have a great night.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks.